And hello, this is our review of Chapter 12. And Chapter 12 is Family Adaptation Across Cultures Toward a Loved One Who is Disabled. And I imagine that this could be a topic for an entire course in a social sciences degree program or a social work program. But I think it's an important one for us to be aware of. Because as we work with individuals, we're going to be working with not only the patient, but in many cases, we are also providing support and education for the family. And so, what is a family? Well, in the United States, family can be just about anything you want it to be. The textbook gives some statistics on family and describes things like the number of people living in a household, the average income per household. You can Google those things and learn those things at any point in time. Obviously, the numbers of individuals in a house, the size of the house or the residence, the financial resources, the poverty level of the family, all those things might have an impact upon the physical therapy and occupational therapy services that we provide. But also, too, families are the support systems for individuals with disabilities. And the families that we work with are going to be large, they're going to be small, they're going to have one child, maybe no children, maybe an individual is caring for older adults. Maybe the couple is a heterosexual couple, maybe the couple is a homosexual couple. So there's going to be a variety of ways that family is going to be represented to us. Regardless on how a family is configured from a demographic perspective, they are going to be part of the support and care for the patients that we're working with. And our textbook presents 6 characteristics as defined by Lynn in 1994. These are 6 characteristics of healthy families dealing with a disability among its members. There's a commitment that involves the prioritization of family over self. And I'm just going to read portions of these. You can read the rest. There's a togetherness, right? People spending time together. There's an appreciation and admiration of an individual's strengths, talents, and interests, and an encouragement of individual pursuits. There's good communication that establishes a sense of belonging, diminishes frustrations, and improves relations. A spiritual well-being that involves the family sharing a common faith or spiritual belief that increases family cohesion. And a coping with crisis and stress that involves the family willingness to face the reality of difficult situations and cope effectively. So, what are reactions to a family member with a disability? Text describes emotional reactions, stress reactions, and marital discord. Obviously, when a disability occurs, can have a profound effect, and who that disability or who experiences that disability can have a profound effect. And so it's probably multi-layered, right? If a member of the family, if somebody marries into a family and there's an individual already a disability there, that's probably a different scenario than if a young couple have a child who develops a disability. So looking at emotional reactions, a chronic sorrow has been described, a regret and sorrow experienced by parents that maybe who have birthed a child with a disability or there has been an unexpected loss of a child. There's a novelty shock crisis, a state of confusion resulting from a lack of information and societal reaction. There is a caregiver burden. That term, used to assist in the understanding of the amount of responsibility placed on caregivers, can result in extraordinary stress. There are stress reactions. Stress occurs when any demand placed on an individual or system exceeds the coping capacity. And stresses can be emotional, financial, they can impact or challenge schedules, they can modify all aspects of one's activities, goals, they can create societal isolation, can cause difficulty in educational placements, and contribute to marital discord. And then there is marital discord. Marital difficulties are frequently discussed in the research in regards to families with disabilities. And I could not imagine the challenges that a couple would face as the life that they were maybe expecting has drastically been altered in front of their eyes. And is the couple able to make changes in such a way that supports the needs of the individual, the needs of the couple, and also takes care of all of the needs of the child? I know a couple right now that is having marital discord. They have 3 children, and each child has different levels of special needs. And so it is exhausting as a parent of 3 children to raise 3 healthy children, let alone I can't appreciate the challenges that go on with the medical attention that these children need, with the educational stresses that are associated with working with and educating these children, and how that impacts the couple's ability to spend time with each other. Now, looking at factors that influence adjustment to disability in the family, families have a great impact on the recovery or adjustment, well-being, and success of an individual with a disability, and family competence is considered by many to be a key factor in adjustment to disability. Howell and Del Orto in 2004 noted 7 family characteristics that will influence how a family reacts to disability. Well, as we see here are some of the characteristics that we talked about earlier that were the characteristics of healthy families that deal with disability. And now, going to the next slide, we're looking at the 7 family characteristics that will influence how a family reacts to disability. There are risk factors. Risk factors contribute to poor functioning in a family. These include a lack of support systems, family compositions that may add stress to such as single-parent households, stressed families, and families in conflict. Protective factors, identified as strong family connections, effective communication, and problem solving, will increase the likelihood that families will successfully adapt. Belief systems that are moderated by religious and cultural values impact how the family manages the demands of disability, makes sense of the disability, and communicates with health professionals. Access to coping resources includes personality strengths, previous life experiences, positive attitudes, values and religious beliefs, extend family support, and community and financial resources. Family history involves the previous experiences in dealing with illness and disability and managing loss. Family relationships and communication styles involves the members' ability to be open and honest with one another, to nurture each other, and to function in a well-structured manner versus members acting in isolation. And the last one, who in the family is disabled plays a role in that dreams and expectations are affected differently based on if the member is a caretaker or a dependent. Caretaker impairment will have a more detrimental impact on the family. So now looking at adjustment models, a number of models have been used to describe processes or the process of family adaptation to disability. Reuben Hill in 1949 described the family stress theory, created this after work with families of soldiers. His model explained how a stressor event, the family's perception of that event, and the available resources interacted to avoid or create a crisis reaction. In 1983, McCubbin et al. Developed the double ABCX, which was kind of an expansion upon the family stress theory. It incorporated the use of family coping mechanisms to deal with a crisis event, recognizing an accumulation of stress on families over time and the need to use existing and new resources and coping skills to reach positive adaptation, termed bond adaptation. There is the family resilience model. Resilience being our ability to adapt and adjust to difficult times. In rehab, resiliency refers to the ability to adapt and adjust to disability and then to achieve successful outcomes. Family resilience refers to the family's ability to make these successful adaptations. So, another model, which is a resiliency-based one, the resiliency model of family stress adjustment and adaptation, again, developed by McCubbin et al., focuses on how families can positively adjust and be able to maintain their quality of life. So we're not a social sciences course per se, we're not social workers. So we're just giving kind of an overview of some of these different adjustment models. There are stage models. And these stage models, these have been used to describe the adjustment of persons to disability over time. So in 1984, Blacher described adjustments for parents. First, there's an emotional crisis, that initial emotional crisis. And so, as you might expect, there's those feelings of denial and shock. Second stage is fluctuating emotions. And those include things listed there: anger, depression, guilt, shame, maybe rejection of the child and overprotection of the child. And then finally, there is the stage of acceptance. This model has also been tooled with by Andrig et al. 1982. They called the grieving process. It had 3 stages: confronting, adjusting, and adapting. Now, in reviewing the literature related to reactions of parents and children with disabilities, Ferguson et al. Described 5 approaches to conceptualizing parental reactions: psychodynamic, functionalist, psychosocial, interactionist, or adaptational. For the longest time, the psychodynamic approach was the primary one viewed to describe parental reactions to disability. This led to viewing parental reactions from a pathological standpoint, viewed as either apathetic or involved and either angry or accepting. From this standpoint, parents' reactions were framed as unhealthy and neurotic. Even involvement with the child could be interpreted as resulting from an underlying guilt. Justifiable anger at a lack of appropriate care could be seen as displaced anger and a lack of adjustment. So they made it too psychological. They made it too pathologic. A shift occurred in the 60s Looking at more of a functionalist approach, this frequently labeled parents' reactions as dysfunctional, and children's parents were often seen as additionally disabling to the child. In the 70s, the psychosocial approach to viewing disability focused on the interplay of the environment and the emotions of the parents. The emotions of shock, loneliness, stress, and grief became the focus. It was during this time there was work on chronic sorrow and in the area of shock and grief as ways to conceptualize parent reactions. Later, the interactionist standpoint views parental reactions as a function of societal stigma, fatigue, disempowerment, and poverty, leading parents to feel powerless. Finally, the most recent approach to viewing parental reactions, the adaptational approach that emphasizes supportive social policy and cultural values as essential components of parental reaction and disability. It emphasizes the adaptability and resilience of families and recognizes coping skills and positive aspects of raising a child with disability, including the potential for marital and spiritual growth and family harmony. So the final model there, the adaptational approach, more empowering, more adaptive. And I can appreciate why in the past people would look at things from a negative view, because if that's the mindset, you're going to be just looking for the negative and how a parent reacts in the situation. So the emotional, financial, and social impact of disability on the family will be determined largely by how the family responds to crisis and how effectively the members manage and resolve conflict, make decisions, and meet role expectations. Families that avoid to seek to escape dealing with disability will likely experience greater disorganization and stress, whereas families that demonstrate competence in reorganizing and actively addressing issues by changing their behaviors and their attitudes will likely have greater positive adjustment. So I think we can appreciate that if there is a new onset of disability, again, we're treating the patient with the disability, but especially in the case where there's parents, where there are people that need to be providing care, what level of psychosocial care are those individuals going to need? Because, and not to use this as a negative term, but the new onset of disability is obviously going to be disruptive to the life plans of the family, of both the individual and the family. And I imagine in some cases that may take a long time for somebody to work through. And we aren't trained as PTs and OTs to handle that aspect. That's going to be where we need to bring in the social workers and the psychologists. Let's talk about disability impact and the family member with a disability. So when a child has a disability, the extent of the physical impairment, the predictability of the course of the illness, and whether or not it is life-threatening affects the reactions of the family and children to disability. The more severe and difficult the management of the disability, the greater the family's susceptibility to stress reactions, frustrations, and feelings of being overwhelmed. And I gave that example earlier of individuals that I am aware of who are having marital discord and likely headed for divorce because of, not because of the children, but because of how they are working together in service of the children. And again, anybody that has been a parent, has children, knows how exhausting it can be, exhausting in a positive way, exhausting in a negative way at times. And how is that magnified when, again, you've got the financial stresses associated with the healthcare needs, you've got the lack of time for your partner because you're giving all of your time to the children, there's all the other stresses related to schooling, etc., etc. The decision to place a child with a disability outside of the home is difficult for many parents. Several studies have demonstrated that increased stress is related to the extent of behavioral problems that may in turn affect the family's decision to place the child in residential care. This decision generally occurs at birth and the transition out of high school. In a study to examine outside placement decisions of parents of young adults with severe intellectual disability, McIntyre et al. Found that the outside home placement could be predicted by the extent of behavior problems and mental health problems of the young adult. And I could see that being very difficult too. It could be easy on one hand to sit back and judge people and say, like, oh, why are they doing that? But it's hard to, what's the saying about if you're a doctor, you shouldn't treat your family? And it's hard to be the loved one for a family member and also to do everything that needs to be done to care for the health of that individual. In this particular situation, I think, again, they're talking about individuals with severe intellectual disability that requires significant care and time. And I can appreciate how a parent could just be so burnt out that they feel like maybe that they've lost everything. What about when a partner has a disability? Because most of the caregiving falls on the spouse, the impact of disability can be overwhelming for couples. Researchers have found that among couples in which one partner has a spinal cord injury, the caregiver partner had equal or higher levels of stress, fatigue, resentment, and anger when compared with the partner with a disability. Researchers have reviewed the impact of disability on the partner's caregiver and concluded that they have higher levels of stress than any other caregiver due to the psychological and social effects of caring for their partner. Because again, there's been a major disruption from that partner that you're going through life together with to the partner that you're now caring for, who may, especially in those situations where there's quadriplegia, have significant health requirements. And what if this happens to a family that lacks resources? Such a challenging situation. What about when a parent has a disability? Early speculation related to children being raised by persons with disabilities suggests that children were in danger of negative emotions and behaviors, such as anxiety and depression, and developmental issues such as dependency, helplessness, overcompliance, social alienation, and isolation. However, empirical literature presents no definitive evidence of these negative parenting effects. So, like the Beatles say, all you need is love. So maybe if that parent has that disability, it doesn't have a big impact upon the child as long as that child has their needs met. And oftentimes those needs can be met by the other parent, if there is another parent around, and also by just having that love and support. There are those studies that the authors talk about where there are situations where children take on or assume caregiving roles. And in those situations, those can cause psychosocial issues for the children. So it's something that needs to continue to be observed. How about when a sibling has a disability? Depending upon the age of the child, siblings may have a number of reactions to a sister or brother with a disability. Young children may experience some fear that they could catch this, or they may believe that they're responsible in some way, so some unfortunate form of magical thinking. There may even be issues of jealousy or being embarrassed by their sibling. Jealousy because the other child gets different attention. Poor adjustment of siblings has been attributed to high levels of family conflict, poor parent functioning, low family adaptability and cohesion, and deficit problem-solving skills and communication. Now, looking at cultural impact on family adaptation. So, in this section, the textbook chapter author addresses culture in relation to family dynamics and responses, and tries to look at U.S. culture and how odd U.S. culture might seem to others, and how it might seem different to those who migrate to the U.S. So here are some cultural impact on family adaptation. Americans will invite strangers, people they've never met, into their homes. Visitors to an American home might be allowed or even encouraged to see any room in the house. It's not unusual for people to visit a home in the winter to use the bed in the master bedroom as a place to deposit their coats. Some entertaining might take place in the kitchen. The kitchen is not exclusive territory of the female of the house. Men might be seen helping in the kitchen. Children may get more attention than they would in some other countries. The children might be included in a social activity, particularly in the activities around dinner. The host might have pets, usually dogs or cats, who live in the house along with all the human inhabitants. The social interaction might entail mixing of the sexes, although it sometimes happens that women will form their own conversation groups and men theirs. There's no rigid sexual segregation in American social gatherings. And although they will make certain accommodations for guests, particularly for guests at a formal gathering, Americans do not have the idea that their normal lives should be entirely devoted to guests during the time the guests are visiting them. Thus, if they have other obligations that conflict with hosting, they may turn their attentions to their other commitments, such as providing transportation for young children who have obligations, or answering a telephone call and engaging in an extended conversation. So, what then I think the author is trying to discuss here is these are some cultural experiences within the United States. And these cultural experiences are things that may differ from individuals living in other cultures, other countries, and cultures for that matter. Disability is one of those areas that there may be differences in how people in other cultures interact or deal with. And so those might be some different cultural impact. There might be some different family adaptations associated with that. And I'm not going to go through each of these. What the textbook author discusses is there are unique characteristics to the African American family, to the Asian American families, and Latino families, and how those may interact, or how disability may be viewed, and how it might impact family. If that's an interest to you, I would refer you to the chapter to read through that. But we're coming up on 30 minutes here for this one, so I'm going to go ahead and end this particular recording.